It is my privilege to have Jason Trowbridge share his job search story. Jason, it's all you.
Thank you. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Um, well, I'm not sure that I'm going to be as interesting a story maker as some of the ones in the past, but I will give it a good shot here. So, I was thinking about what to say about my unemployment story. And I think one of the main things that I ought to describe off of here is that I've made mistakes during my job hunt. That's okay. Mistakes are how we learn. And fortunately, this group and Steve have been enormous helps for helping me realize what my mistakes are and improving my job search. So I was laid off on October 15th, 2024, after 12 years at Goldman Sachs in Salt Lake. Uh, Very nice job. I had lots of people that I really enjoyed working with, and 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 I have to say, overall, it was a very positive, good experience. However, Goldman Sachs is one of these companies where every year they aim to lay off at least 5% of their workforce every year. This layoff occurs at all levels. They also get so even more senior people get laid off um, on a yearly basis. The reason they are upfront about this is something that is told to people when you are hired, that they do this, um, as it provides more opportunity for new people coming into the employee, both to advance within the organization and for them to hire new people. Um, but what this means in reality is that effectively every so often a team must lay off a person on the team. The larger the team, the more often they must lay off people. If somebody leaves your team, for say another job on their own, that can provide a bit of a reprieve. But otherwise, um, a layoff is going to hit your team eventually. The longer you've been in a role, the more likely you are to have been laid off. Part of this is to encourage people to be very ambitious and advance within the firm. So, if you become a manager, if you become a managing director, things like that will stave off your own personal layoff longer and longer. Um, but sometimes when a layoff hits your team, it's easy for the manager to choose who to lay off. Sometimes I have been on the team before where we have um, hired somebody who just really was not working out for the team. They could not um, deliver on schedule. They could not learn new things well, and they were not active in trying to figure out and help everybody else figure out what was causing them difficulty. So that's happened. I've also been on the team when our team was 3 people in size. We were pretty well protected against layoffs during then because we had only 3 people. So if somebody was sick, we only had 2 people. Um, that was a very tense period, and fortunately, everybody, took that into account. Um, Now, I had received some advice from my first manager there when I joined Goldman Sachs. Now, at Goldman Sachs, your pay is based off of your yearly bonus. So, if you are going to receive a pay increase, you have to receive a bonus that exceeds a certain threshold. If you do not receive a bonus above that threshold, you receive no pay increase, which due to inflation is equivalent to a pay cut. Um, and indicates that you need to work harder. That said, bonuses are also based off of firm performance. So if an aspect of the firm does not do well, the bonuses could be very small, and everybody could not receive much in the way of a pay bonus. The advice my manager gave was be very careful if you have a year where you do not receive a bonus at all. If you do not receive a bonus, you are likely to be cut when the layoffs occur. So, unfortunately, the previous year in 2023, I'd received a large project based off of the amount of resources and team members I had available for the project. I gave an estimate of 8 months for initial completion for deployment, at least in QA and prod parallel environments, and a year to be fully comfortable that the project was working as it should. However, management above my manager wanted a working prototype in 1.5 months with all the features and the requirements available. Given the feature list, I couldn't see how that could be done. And I did push back on that, but was like, which features do you want me to cut and wait for later? And the answer was, no, you need to keep all of them. I should have kept pushing back harder. But with the time pressure, it felt like the time I was taking to push back on the unreasonable deadline was eating up the amount of time I had left in my unreasonable deadline. So at a certain point, I stopped pushing back and started going to work as hard as I could. The project completed on my time scale, not theirs, and I did not receive a bonus that year. So um, things seemed to be going well for me after that. I was again meeting deadlines and completing things as expected. Uh, and but after visiting my dad and my sister on I'd returned to work on October 15th and found out from my manager that I was laid off after 12 years of employment there. So, um, I've only had two professional jobs and two prior unemployment periods. And I'll admit I made mistakes on both. The first unemployment period was right after college graduation. As I was getting ready to graduate with the computer science and electrical engineering degrees, I was applying to jobs before graduation, like college students do. I focused a lot on the telecommunications industry because that's where I could use both my electrical engineering and computer science degrees. And I got no responses back. This is in the days before using the internet to apply for jobs. This was about mailing your resumes to various companies. Most of them were located in Houston. And I didn't even get any response back from any of these companies. I had planned a trip to visit the companies in person to see if I could deliver my resumes in person and ask about jobs, and that failed entirely because that we were hit with a terrible ice storm as I was traveling into Texas, and I got stuck for an entire week because the interstates were closed due to this horrible ice storm that caused something like 600 accidents in 300 miles. Um, so I was stuck in a small town with a single DVD of Final Destination, and I cannot stand that movie or that series at all. I've seen that movie too many times, and it's a terrible movie. Anyway, that summer, um, I kept my college job because I pre-registered for the fall. There was no money down that was, or no, I didn't have to put anything down. I just had to pre-register um, with the knowledge that I was going to lose my job when fall started because I couldn't actually afford to do more college. And that summer, the telecom industry suddenly laid off a third of their workforce. The summer of 2001, if you recall, that's when the telecom industry bubble burst. And there were apparently a lot of new grads who'd moved to, say, Houston to start work, who suddenly found that they moved there, started a lease, and didn't have a job. So I was very lucky that I actually hadn't been hired there. Um, Instead, I got hired through something that Steve has talked a lot about, networking. A friend of mine who had been working at an internship at a very small five-person company in Socorro, New Mexico. And she said, "Hey, they're looking at somebody who knows stuff about electrical engineering. Um, why don't you come interview?" So I did. And I managed to get that job, and I worked there for 11 years. The I worked remotely for it for 4 years because moved up to Utah to join my boyfriend, who is now my husband. We've been together for 20 years as of this year. Um, and, so I worked remotely before working remotely was much of a thing. Um, but the project that I was working on finally came to completion, and they wanted to start a new project that would have required a heck of a lot more travel, uh, like 3 weeks out of every month for at least the short term. So we separated ways. Now that time, my unemployment went pretty well. I had a brief period where I kind of treated it as a vacation. And then I went to the Department of Workforce Services and I took classes there. They showed, it had been 11 years since I'd done my resume. I knew that resumes were done differently, and sure enough, they showed how to do resumes. They gave mock interviews. They had mock interviews available, and yeah, I put up my resume on Monster.com, which I'm not even sure Monster.com exists anymore, but um, and applied to some jobs, and a recruiter noticed it and called me, and I um, got an interview at Goldman Sachs. His question was, "You're applying, where are you applying for?" And I was like, "Well, I'm applying to these technical-based companies." And he's like, "Have you considered a bank?" And I was like, "Well, no, I haven't." And it pointed out, and one of the things I learned at Goldman Sachs is one of the biggest technology focused firms out there. And people don't think of it that way because it's involved with banking, but all of banking is electronic now. And the amount of hard, massive scale problems that have to be solved at firms like Goldman Sachs, it's pretty incredible. It was a challenge. I learned a heck of a lot during that job. So, um, and I hate to say it, but my old team, I honestly have no. I'm when I got laid off, I was very sad. There were a couple times on the ride home where it was like, keep it together, don't cry on the train. There's a whole bunch of people that just do not need to see an adult man crying on the train here. They're just trying to get home or to work. Um, and fortunately, one thing that I have that I've always had during almost all my life is I have a dog. So I got home and dogs make you feel better. And I took him to a trail. There's the Jordan River Trail in Murray is absolutely beautiful. And I took him there and we walked up and down the Jordan River Trail, and that helped me feel so much better and to think about things. Because the sad part is I have a lot of experience, I had a lot of knowledge and everything, but I'd been there for an awful long time. And I did have a recent um, the project worked, but the timeline was, well, it was my timeline, not the timeline that was wanted for the project. So, so I would say that I was probably the lowest performer at that moment for our team. And I had mentored and worked with our team members, several of them fresh out of college or grad school. They're smart people. They're very good people. After I was laid off in the next day, that day and the following day, the various team members reached out because they weren't in on it. They had no clue that I was going to be laid off. That's how Goldman Sachs operates when they do the layoffs. You go in for a meeting and you just do not come back. Um, and nobody else knew except from your manager, who they're not allowed to tell or indicate or hint that the layoff is occurring. Um, so the fact that everybody reached out to me, that was very touching. That was very good. Now, I then made another mistake because they gave me a very generous severance. My manager told me repeatedly that he really hated that he was having to let me go. And I know it's hard on the managers because they don't get to make the decision that somebody has to be fired or laid off. They just have to implement that decision. Um, so he told me that he had fought for a really good severance package, and it was. It's a severance package practically unheard of. I received severance all the way through until the beginning of this month, and health insurance all the way to the end of this month. So I have been getting paid as if I was still employed. Um, which that's amazing. I've been able to do a lot of work focusing on courses on things that I have fallen behind on. That's one of the mistakes I made working at Goldman Sachs. I found when I started job hunting is that I have become very specialized. Computers are always changing. There's always new stuff coming out. And it can be hard to keep up on that, especially when you're putting in all your time at work. Because the last thing after I've spent 9 hours working software and thinking about the projects at that, last thing I want to do is come home and do more software development. I want to take a break and talk to friends. I want to talk to my husband. I want to go on dog walks, and those are important. But in the computer industry, it's very important to try and keep up your skills. And I learned new things constantly, but not the big new things that everybody's asking for when they're hiring new people. We did not do front stack development. I'm a back end developer. We didn't do lots of cloud computing because we were deeply focused on low latency behavior. So I'm very specialized. If I wanted to get a new job in a place like New Jersey, there's apparently quite a few other banks and place and investment opportunities and companies in New Jersey that are available. Heck, there's quite a few here in the Salt Lake Valley, but they're down in Provo, and the commute would be terrible. Um, so I'm a little on the specialized side now. Um, and I haven't picked up on that. So I've been taking courses during my unemployment to pick up on that. I also, because my severance was very generous, I was not in a hurry to get hired again. Um, I mean, I got laid off in October. We had plans and plane tickets for trips and vacations in November and December. Um, and I figured, our company's really trying to hire people in December? Maybe not, but as soon as December ends, they're looking to hire people, and I wasn't ready in January. Um, to be honest, I was sluggish, very sluggish about job hunting because, as I've confirmed by doing by going being unemployed again, I really hate applying to jobs. I really hate working on my resume and customizing a resume for an application because if you get rejected again, it feels like you did a lot of work and nobody cared what you actually produced. You have to produce it in order to eventually find the job where somebody says yes. But all the times that you get a no, I know I'm so glad for this team for keeping my spirits up and Steve as well, because it feels like you just wasted your time. Why did I bother applying for this company when all they did was spent 30 minutes to or an hour working on the resume to make it fit their job description if all they're going to do is send back an automated no message um, in a while. And the bad part is a lot of the companies that I applied to, they didn't send immediate no messages. They sent them like 2, 3 weeks later on, which is kind of like so that was a waste, and you didn't tell me it was going to be a waste until afterwards. Whatever. I know that they have their own problems. There is a lot going on with the application with the hiring industry as well. AI is changing everything so much faster. I know that recruiters are receiving so many resumes now every day. The volumes that they have to sift through is going up, and it's hard. Um, so there's been a lot of mistakes. I will say that it has been difficult. Um, so I did have several opportunities that came up during the unemployment period. Um, I got contacted by an old college friend of mine who was looking to try and start a his own startup. Unfortunately, that fell through, and he did not get the funding necessary to get going on it, which is a shame. I do think that his idea is really worthwhile. And hopefully he'll have the opportunity to do it at a later time. That said, I appreciate being contacted him. One thing I struggle with, and to be honest, a number of the people I went in college struggle with too, is social networking. And I don't mean in-person social networking. I do very well when I see people in person. But using social media is strangely hard for me. It's stressful. I don't like it. It feels like I'm shouting out into a void. Um, to be honest, Steve, I still haven't posted much on my LinkedIn policy profile aside from my resume and stuff like that. I haven't made posts on there. You would not want to if you follow me, I'm not messing up your timeline because I'm not posting much. But I don't do that on my personal social media either. It's I don't know what about, but it is very uncomfortable for me. I'm very thankful I got this job because otherwise I think I would have to get over that and start working with it. Steve has pushed me to do a lot of things that are uncomfortable but necessary. I've learned a lot during this. The customizing your resume, working on your resume, the whole functional resume idea that Steve has pointed out. That wasn't something I remember learning about in college. And so it's it's new, it's different, and I appreciate learning that. I also got feedback from Canonical. They're a company that produces a Linux distribution. That's what they're most known for. But they also produce a bunch of Linux-based solutions, including local cloud computing. Um, the difference is that you can't apply with just your resume. They have massive numbers of questions that you have to answer, and in order to get a job, get an offer there. I had gone through their initial web page, which has a long list of questions and answers. Um, and I have completed the written exam, which was 38 questions. I wrote, and they're fairly open-ended questions. I had 20 pages worth of responses for those 38 questions. That said, I've canceled my application process there because I don't want to waste their time. The job that I did get is at APSI. I think it's APSI Wireless Solutions. I found them through the Utah Department of Workforce Services. They had a virtual job fair, and I think what really benefited me there, they had a group chat, and then they could start an individual chat, one-on-one chat. But you started out in the group chat. And I looked through and I could see what other people had been talking about on there. And there were a lot of people saying, "Hey, I do web pages or I create web applications. Are you looking for that?" And they repeatedly were saying, "No, we do not need this." You know, um, they're looking for a C++ developer, which is my primary wheelhouse. They are looking for somebody who has deep knowledge of networking. I don't think my knowledge of networking is as deep as what they use, but I have written more than a few programs and debugged issues with using custom protocols. Um, so the APSI job description really relates to what I have on my resume. I looked through their chat, discovered how they were responding to people, noted that, you know, that a lot of people kept posting kind of the same thing. Again, I saw repeatedly, "Hey, I develop web apps. Are you looking for something for me?" And them responding, "No, we do not have a need for that at this time." And then you'd have somebody asking the same thing and "Hi, I'm a web app, a front end React developer. Yeah, you need someone like me?" And they'd say no again. So the Department of Workforce Services had a session before their job fair where they gave tips and hints and showed how to navigate the job fair. And so I had written up a paragraph. So I wrote up a paragraph of what to sell myself. "Hello, I've worked at Goldman Sachs for this years. I specialize in writing these types of programs. C plus, I have this many years of experience with C++. I have written programs that deal with networking." Um, I was more specific than that. Um, you know, so, let me know if you're interested. And I sent my resume. And I didn't get an immediate response. To be honest, I have no clue how long, uh, how much attention any one particular person for any of these companies has. Um, Knowing the company now, they were probably also doing their actual work while also being virtually online at the job fair. They gave so I was upstairs. I just left the website open, went upstairs and had lunch. And when I came down, I found that they had responded and said, "Hey, we got some more questions." So I answered the questions. We had a one-on-one chat. And they said, "Can you send the resume?" Well, I'd uploaded it through their main thing. Sure, sent it again. Um, and landed an in-person interview the following week. Um, they had a follow-up interview 2 weeks from there, which I did in person. And finally, um, at the end of but they told me at the end of the second interview that it was between me and one other person. They did the Monty, the man interviewing me, said that he would like to get us both, but that might he said I could hire you both. I could hire one of you, or I could hire none of you. He was upfront about this is the way it could go. I was like, okay. I felt pretty good about the in-person interviews. I have a friend who works at the Department of Workforce Services, and he came over to my house after work and gave a mock interview. I also had the time to use some of the tools that LHH has, as that's the employment agency that Steve Botter was going through to. I guess you're a subcontractor, Steve?
So we are a global partner of,
Okay, a
of
partner. Okay, partner. Yeah. So, but LHH has some interesting AI-based tools that actually work very, very well. They have a game, for example, where you can speak and on a various topic, and it will penalize you every time you say or ah or any of those noises, which you can tell I haven't practiced in a little bit because I am making those noises during this this talk. Uh, they also had, but I got an in-person interview, and the feedback I thought was very good from my friend. The day before I went to go have my in-person interview. Both of my in-person interviews went went over time. 45 minutes or 30 minutes over the first interview, and we went over 45 minutes for the second interview, which I took as a very good sign. At the end of them, I did check to see, like, if you were to hire me, what sort of things would you have me focus on? So I got to learn, and they were upfront throughout the interview about that this was an interview that works both ways. And I do think that I will fit in well at APSI. I have a lot of experience with ensuring that software it runs correctly, that things are tested properly before use, and I've mentored a number of more junior developers. I haven't been a manager. I haven't ever had to lay off anybody or deliver terrible news. It's never been in my wheelhouse. But it does sound like to me from what they were discussing that they are looking for somebody who can help them with the more junior developers that they have on hand. Uh, I really wish that I'd gotten some of the other advice feedback from here because some of our previous people who've given stories have mentioned that at the end of their interview, they ask, so, you know, oh, I forget the exact phrasing, but the whole, you know, so what reservations do you have about me? Yeah, I wish I'd had that one. But that said, Uh, it's taken a very long time, about 2 months, but APSI got back to me with a job offer a couple of weeks ago on a Friday, and it's what I'm looking for benefits, and it's going to be a lot of stress off our family. My husband has been stressed because, well, his he works at the Red Cross, and there's apparently a dispute going on involving the union, involving the workers, in that the Red Cross is not uh, has not accepted the contract and apparently has stopped negotiating in good faith. So it's possible that there could be a strike at the Red Cross, and if that happens, then he won't have any income coming in for however long the strike is. We we did when we bought our house here, we chose a house that we could afford, that if one person was laid off, that that we could afford, and that we would not be at risk of losing our home, um, and be in and going homeless. So it wouldn't be fun, but it was going to be very, very doable. And we've had to use this before. My husband got laid off for being in a same-sex relationship. He got fired for it. And that was a hard one to recover from because the nice thing is that I've only ever been laid off, which is treated vastly differently than if you've been fired. It took 6 months for my husband to get a job, and it was a terrible job that he had to take. But it was what he had to do so that he could start applying back for the jobs that honestly he was qualified for. But so that's my story. Some things that I've gotten out of it, you know, Steve and crew, they can give you a lot of advice on your resume. Make sure your resume is done. Steve gave me a list of recruiters, and I know that he's pitched some of the recruiters here, um, on here, which he was telling me that I needed to contact. And if I hadn't received the job offer from APSI, I would have been contacting them. So Steve, he is a big resource. He is a big help, and I'm very glad to have had his help throughout this process. Um, the fact that this team has driven home how a resume isn't something you do once, and then you're like, look at my pretty resume. It's for everybody. No, resumes have to be customized, especially nowadays, especially with online applying. It may have been fine in the days before applying online, but nowadays you just don't. So many people are applying to every single job that you need to be able to stand out somehow and look and get the recruiters and people to look at your resume. And that's going to take customizing for everybody. AI can really help. I will tell you that this kind of that in a lot of ways I am an AI skeptic. I know a lot of how it works under the covers. And to be honest, in a lot of ways, AI is really fancy autocorrect. It is autocorrect on that takes a lot of computational power, but it is all probability based. What it tells you is going to be based off of what has been trained on. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't know what a dog is, for example. It just knows that people use the term dog in these situations and uses it from there. There is no person, there is no thought, there is no consciousness behind AI, but that doesn't mean that AI cannot be useful. The tools that um, LHH had for testing your interviewing process and for testing um, your your ability to avoid using ums and uhs. That's all AI. Um, it can help your resume match job descriptions. It can give you feedback about what it thinks of your resume. I have done that, and I actually got what I thought was really positive response back. Again, I know that that's not a real person on the other end. It is given this resume, this is what people say about it, essentially. And it is taking all this knowledge, all this data that it's been trained on, and using that to give you feedback. So it can still be really good feedback and can really help you through these things. But um, but I admit I also have a complicated relationship with AI because I think puts a lot of people's jobs at risk and a lot of people's livelihoods at risk. Um, and I do worry about what it is. doing when you can use AI instead of a newly hired or graduate or newly available, you know, person. A lot of entry level jobs may be able to do AI, which means that people need to be thinking, how do we get more entry jobs then? So anyway, I've made mistakes. And I think one of them is that I rambled on long enough. So I open it up to your questions.
Okay. I'm going to throw people in randomly. So first random is Mike Anderson.
Hi, Mike.
Jason, congratulations. Oh, congratulations. I'm excited for you. This is absolutely fantastic. Um, there are similarities in our stories that draw me to you. I appreciate very much you sharing with us the question, what reservations do you have about me? That's going into my stack right the heck now. Um, and that's going to be true whether it's a job interview or a sales pitch or I don't know, whatever. Maybe I'll even ask my wife if I'm really feeling brave. But um, so I'm wondering, Jason, were there any other of these kinds of gems that you picked up that you could rattle off and share with us? Um, oh, there I just ummed. That was
Yeah,
not good.
that's fine. Um, no, a lot of it is finding out. I think it's worthwhile to know what's going on in the job market, and when you are employed, keeping yourself up to date based off of some of the things on the job market. That probably would have made things a lot easier for me to apply, at least for local jobs. Now, on the other hand, you know, so that could have been useful. Um, I probably was more selective than I should have been looking at jobs. There were an awful lot of jobs that I didn't apply to because, again, they listed that they were looking for a front end developer with experience in React um, and these sorts of things. And it's one of those, it's like, well, I've got all the back end knowledge. I've used MongoDB, I've used SQL databases, I've done networking, things like that, written lots of stuff on the back end, React, HTML, CSS. Before getting laid off, I hadn't done anything with that since 2014, which is an ancient ice age. So
But
I
you're
didn't even
smart
apply.
enough with all this other stuff that you could
Yes,
learn that in 2 weeks.
I can, and I've been taking courses, so I probably should have
Mhm.
applied to more of those jobs. The ones I did, I tended to get rejected out of hand because of the ATS system. I'm pretty sure that I did not meet, the 80% threshold for those jobs, and that was discouraging. So I stopped applying to those jobs. But that said, you only need one job to say yes
Mhm.
for you to become employed. So maybe that was a mistake to do that. Um, I recognize I've been specialized, so a lot of the jobs that I've been applying for have been specialized. I think the other thing that I did that I think was working well is thinking up other companies, again, like Canonical. I sent the link to Canonical for Steve. They have like 150 job openings listed all the time, but they're not a simple application process. You do not just submit your resume and you are going to work to get a job at Canonical. Part of that is because they are fully remote. They are a fully remote company. Everybody works remotely there. And then what they do is that twice a year they have a convention in some country, usually I think European, because I think the headquarters are based around there, where everybody who works in the company goes to this convention and is at a convention for 2 weeks before you go back home, and that's how they keep their company culture. But you have a big weed out process in order to get people in there. I think I could have finished getting through the weed out process, but honestly, I'd rather work with in-person people than remotely. I can work remotely. I have, but I find that I have higher anxiety when I can't interact with my employees and managers. Um, so don't just look on LinkedIn and Indeed and places like that. Go to the company websites. And in fact, with LinkedIn, Ars Technica had an article recently about how there are services out there where you can submit your resume and they will automatically apply for jobs on LinkedIn for you by taking the job description, up using AI to update your resume so that it has the keywords and the skills that they're looking for, and automatically sending your application to that job. Which some of the recruiters interviewed in that Ars Technica article were saying, um, we're getting resumes from people who don't have the experience we're looking for, but are getting past our automated tracking system, and that's making things more work for us and slowing us down a lot. Um,
Stop
but
using ATS, people.
well, or yeah, you've got the ATS. Yeah, but it also because LinkedIn makes it very easy to apply.
Mhm.
And Steve's pointed out that services like the easy apply button on there on LinkedIn have terrible fetch rates, probably due to stuff like this. The fact that people just need to click a single button to submit their resume. Um, but individual companies, when they take the time to make their own hiring, and make their own application process, um, they may not have it listed on LinkedIn. And it certainly wouldn't support easy apply on LinkedIn to begin with. You may have to work harder for the application, but I do think that is by making it more work to apply, you filter out the casual people that are just looking to send their resume off into the void.
Mhm.
So you may have more luck going through such a system.
I'm a fellow AI skeptic because I know it from the statistical side, while you know it from the computer science side.
Yeah.
And Steve and I had a little experience a week or two ago where we put my resume in, we tied it to a job description and said, customize this resume. What came out of the AI had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anything I'd ever done. Well,
I
almost nothing.
I had it write a cover letter for me once. I gave it the job description, I gave it my resume, told it to write a cover letter, and the cover letter that it produced, read through it, it was like, this is hot garbage. On the other hand, it showed me this is a bad one. I now know how to write a good one, because I was sitting looking at the blank page going, I don't know how to start. Reading through the bad one, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to emphasize instead. And it did have things like the format reasonably correct, an
Mhm.
introductory paragraph, three supporting paragraphs focusing on different topics, and then a concluding paragraph. Um, which, to be fair, I wrote an awful lot of those essays in early college and high school, in
Mhm.
that format. Um, that said, I stopped writing cover letters when based off of the results of one of our prior people who gave advice on here. She was a recruiter. I'm sorry, Steve, I'm terrible with names. I don't remember the names of all these wonderful people who were telling us really good advice. But she said, as a recruiter, she's like, do not post a cover letter because she's like, I have about a minute to 2 minutes to decide whether or not to chuck a resume. And if you provide, so I'm not looking for things of the, oh, this person will stand out. I'm looking for ways that I can say, oh, I'm going to get rid of this resume because they made a mistake here. And if you provide a cover letter, that's more places where you can give mistakes. That was so her advice was do not do cover letters, that they put you at risk and make it easier for a recruiter to toss you out. instead of recommending you.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Great story, Jason. Thank you for sharing it.
Okay.
Okay. Next up is, let's go with a Jason. Let's pick another Jason. Let's take Jason Huff.
Perfect. Thank you, and congratulations on your job offer. That's huge, and quite the journey. One thing that I appreciated in your story was learning. I've kind of learned too that there were some things that I wanted to do while I was at my last position, and I even actively asked the company if they'd help me get PMP certified, and I know that electrical engineering has different certifications, and they even said they would, but then I'm like, nah, it just makes me more marketable for the next job. I don't need it right now. I'm sadly mistaken right now. So I'm kind of in the same process and doing some classes and some training for that. But that one resonated with me. And so, yeah, I appreciate your story. And it was, man, that's a long journey, back from October.
Yeah, and I can put a lot of it on me. I think that things would have been easier if I'd started faster. Because I do know, and I think most people know, is that the longer you're unemployed, the more skittish employers get of that. Like, why did they have trouble? Um, and it also doesn't help that, okay, the computer industry being cyclical. There are times when I was in college where I knew people who dropped out of college to go join a company because they were getting offered to be paid as if they had their degree. Companies were so desperate for software developers. Um, but that's the boom cycle. When it's the
Mm,
bust, companies are laying off. And in the big software development companies, they're kind of in a bust cycle right now. Microsoft laid off like another 9,000 people a couple of months ago, or I think, no, this month. And they started that, I think, late in 2024. Like Google started laying off people, and investors switched where they were rewarding companies for laying off more employees.
mm.
Uh, so I should have been taking that into account that when it comes to software developers, we're not in a crash, but we're not in a very good time. There's a lot of churn going on, and that makes
A
it
lot of
harder.
saturation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And as you pointed out, with like getting your certification, that takes time and study to do so.
Mhm.
And it's much nicer if you have the certification on hand when you need it than going, oh shit, now I got to take that time and study up and learn more.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you and congratulations. Appreciate it.
Thank,
Thanks
thank you
for your
very
story.
much. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Travis.
Hey, Travis.
See, I'm unmuted. Good.
Yeah.
Uh, First off, thank you so much for kind of sharing your entire journey. I absolutely understand going through and finding that what you thought was going to work didn't necessarily. You'll forgive me if you might have seen me like going down, writing notes, blah, blah, blah. Uh, I think the primary thing, well, the first side note, my nephew, who lived with me for 3 years, it was supposed to be 3 months, but it was 3 years. He also worked at Goldman Sachs. And that highly competitive environment, I realized that they have they create that with the intention of like pushing people constantly, but that can also create a somewhat toxic environment. So the fact that you lasted that long, kudos and congratulations.
Yeah.
Other than that, the you had talked a lot about essentially once you are, let's see, I want to be sure, yes, whether it was you or somebody else that was talking about it, um, reaching a certain level, and I don't like using the word complacency, but you get to a certain point and you are so focused on what needs to be done right now that it's very difficult to focus on what you will need to do next, or what you need to do in order to remain competitive or marketable or that sort of thing. It brought back to my mind the, what is it, the 7 habits of highly effective people, the sharpening the saw. I also, having been in a highly specialized field, workforce management, even though there's a lot of things that go into that, uh, when I put my resume together, I have 20 years of workforce management. You've had 2 jobs in the past, and by the way, kudos on holding on to jobs for over 10 years.
Yeah.
I've never been over, I never made it past 6 myself. But yeah, one of the, sorry, consulting my notes. ADD, I have to write notes. Oh, yeah. So I got that, and that. So with specialization, it makes it difficult to look for anything outside of that. One of the things that I did find, and with some of the AI tools, is
Hmm.
finding what your transferable skills are. I don't believe, uh, especially given my specialization, I don't believe that I'll be able to do that until my retirement. So
Yeah.
seeing the skills that I have and the transferable aspects of that, were you able to get anything from that? And then also, last note, uh, other than, okay, sorry, 2 notes, ADD. uh, the skill saturation. I in There was a very distinct time when it was either the, was it the MSCC, the Microsoft, no, MCSC, Microsoft certified, yeah, certain certifications that people focus on, and then suddenly you have a glut of people with those certifications, and then you're just another statistic. But other than that, this is the last one. Me and my post-it notes. The When it comes to motivation for learning new things, gamifying things. It's one of the things that I am using to jump onto my motivation is, whether it's LinkedIn Learning or any other sort of certification, just getting that kind of personal motivation rather than having to just, draw yourself up and I got to do this next. Making it fun or at least interesting and engaging.
So, okay. So I believe that I've got about 3 questions here to answer. So I'm going to try and answer them for you. Number one, when it comes to note taking, I do that all the time. In fact, I have an application on my computer called Obsidian that I've used with every single one of our team meetings to take notes about what people have been saying. Because personally, If I do not take notes, I have difficulty recalling exactly what happened. I don't necessarily refer to my notes later, but they're there. So there's some free note-taking applications like Obsidian that can help out. It's free, um, and pretty easy to use. As for transferable skills, um, yeah, I mean, I'm the new job is C++ and really deep into networking. And I have used C++ since my very first, since working at my first job, PMC. So that is definitely a transferable skill, along with my experience with writing programs having to deal with networking. To be honest, I learned a lot and a lot of good stuff at Goldman Sachs. Now, when it comes to things like certifications were not really something that was focused upon at Goldman Sachs. They, getting a certification would not change your pay, for example. It would not get you a bonus. Um, if you wanted to if you wanted to do grad school, they had programs to help with grad school. But generally, certifications were not something focused on within the firm. Um, and in fact, there's a second thing that I think hurt me personally is that when you work at Goldman Sachs as a software developer, part of my employment contract stated that any programs that I developed on my own time, Goldman Sachs got first right to um, if I tried to release the program. So um, they later added internal systems and things. So if you wanted to work on open source projects, you could as a Goldman Sachs employee. But generally, that was hard. So, and based off of the initial stuff, it was like, okay, I did develop some programs, but I never released them. I never put them up on GitHub, because then I would need to go through a review process with Goldman Sachs. They wouldn't have cared. They would not have wanted any of the programs that I developed on my spare time. Um, but that also kills for me learning new things because I find it easiest if I can do a new project to incorporate the things that I'm learning. Um, I have been learning React and and JavaScript. I'm going to finish those courses.
Jason,
And uh-huh.
just quick note on that for everybody's benefit. It's worth it to try to negotiate that term out of your employment contract. I've had successes doing that, partly because I have run my own business.
Yeah.
And so, the deal up front is, look, I may continue to serve existing clients. If I come up with anything in that process that I think will be useful to my employer, I will make it available to them, but I retain the rights to it. They can use it freely because I'm an employee and, I'm not going to charge them for it or anything like that, but they don't own it if it's developed for somebody else. And most of the time they're okay with that as long as you're upfront.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't negotiate that when I got hired at Goldman Sachs. And I never tried to renegotiate it while I was there.
It
But
kind of disincentivizes innovation.
it does. It does because if you work on something on the weekends and the company decides, oh, this would be useful for us, then now you just were working your weekends for work, unpaid. Yeah. So it is a killer. Um, you know, uh, but yeah, so I have to work on a little I work best when I'm working on a project. I have a there is a local convention coming up here in 2 weeks, um, which I am going to be running a role-playing game during it. It's a fun system where people get 10 minutes to play in the game, and then that party leaves, and I bring four new people from the audience, and I just switch through the whole time. It's light, it's funny, but I need to be able to show the maps to everybody so they have an idea about where they are, how they're playing. Rules are pretty light during this. There aren't virtual tabletop applications that do what I need to do. So I have written my own for my panel here. It needs to be able to work without being connected to the internet, and it needs to work in kind of a group setting because the players are going to share a tablet that they use to move their tokens around. Um, but that's been very educational. I've learned a lot about React while doing this as I take the course. So I understand too about the gamifying learning. If you don't have a project to drive you, you need to find something that drives you to learn. And that is different for every person. My sister is a school teacher at an alternative school. And I love the fact, and she's very good at it. Her school has a graduation rate of 95%, where the local schools in that area have a graduation rate closer to 50%. And she addresses the fact that not everybody learns the same way. Some of her students have severe ADHD as well. And they have to learn a different way than, say, the majority of students that are at, or the majority of way that teachers teach. So if gamifying learning helps you learn, go for it. Do that. If the idea of having an additional certification available for you is something that you know that this can be used in the future and that's what it takes, do that. If you need a project, do that instead. So,
One of the things that I also picked up, it just occurred to me, uh, oftentimes, and especially re-entering the workforce after having been essentially isolated, you know what you need to do while you are in that particular position, but now re-entering, and I've been going through a dozen different job search websites, and I know that I think on the agenda is talking about JobRight. As I was going through JobRight and many other ones, um, it takes your resume and hashes it out and kind of puts suggestions together for particular jobs, but it also puts together suggestions based off of so skill suggestions based off of what its job suggestions are. And some of those have been incredibly insightful, and that there were blind spots for me. It's the whole you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm using that. Uh, I'm going back to LinkedIn Learning based off of what it's saying, here are your skills. This is what you might need to learn. And so that's incredibly exciting for me. So I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but there you go.
cool. Okay. I do want to throw one thing out based off of, you know, uh, an advantage that I've had is that Ken and I, my husband and I, are is we have a pretty active friend group. So we have usually have people over 2, 3 times a month at our house for a game night. We see these people elsewhere. I talk with them on Discord, because they get together in a group and we can talk about things. Be social. So it is easy for people to become isolated, I think, especially when unemployed. And I don't think a lot of adults have large friend groups aside, most of their social circle ends up being the people at work. So if they do not have the people at work, they lose a lot of that. Um, Church can help for that if you go to church. But being social, interacting with people comfortably is a skill, and you do need to keep that up while you're being unemployed, because eventually you will have an in-person interview, and you need to be comfortable with talking with people. I don't know if you've ever met somebody who was extremely socially isolated, um, but and I have. And there is an off-putting desperation that comes out of people in that situation. And when people are desperate like that, it's easy to want to recoil away from it. So you may be very desperate for a job, but desperation is not what you want to exude in an interview or conversation. Anyway, thank you, Travis.
Desperation is a stinky cologne.
Steve, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Next up is Rennie. There he is.
Hi, Rennie. Hello.
Hi. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Really appreciated your story, and I really connected with the fact that you didn't immediately have to go back to work, and you could take the time to kind of digest it, learn from it, and kind of build off of that. That's something that's kind of with me because of my military retirement.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily need to go back to work, but it's just something that I want to do.
Yeah,
to
it
get
it
back to
is
the feel of
it it is something that you don't want to put off for too long.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I definitely connect with that. One thing you had brought up earlier about requirements with job posts and stuff like that, I wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit because I do have a little experience with that. My previous company, they did a lot of things with that, and like whenever they were trying to hire somebody, they would put it into a single system. In the last case, it was like Workday, but Workday would take that and it would shoot it out to the various different, like it'd go out to LinkedIn and Indeed and Monster and all of them. So they made sure that it would funnel the same information to all those job posting sites, and then they get all these resumes back. And like you said, sometimes when people want to post a cover letter in there, it's just additional stuff that they didn't really want or need. So they just be like, no. They might use the cover letter like later on down the line, but really the resume is really what they want to focus in on. So, but other than that, like I said, I appreciate your story. Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. I thank you for the kind words. Hello, Carl.
Hi, I guess I must be up,
Next
huh?
up is Carl. Sorry, I keep on muting myself. Sorry.
The
So,
bacon expert is here.
yes, did you know it's sad because as I got older, bacon is a big contributor to gout. So now I have to eat less. So,
Well, I'm not allowed to eat any red meats, so that's bacon. That is pork products, beef, lamb,
yeah.
due to health issues as well. So,
First
Carl,
off,
I didn't want to know that about gout. I like bacon. Now I'm gonna have to rethink my eating habits.
well, it's not quite so bad because it's not just bacon. It's anything that tastes good and you like.
yeah, meats tend to do gout. They contribute it, and it's
So,
horrible for anybody who suffers from
but
gout.
yes, it is. So congratulations. I
Thank you.
think I don't want to rehash what a lot of other people have said, but learning kind of struck me when we were talking about learning over the course of my years with my previous company. I said, hey, I'd like to go to this conference, or I'd like to get some additional education or a certification. And the answer was always similar. It didn't matter who my manager at the time was. You don't need that for your current position. You don't need that with us. We're happy with what you have and the job you're doing. And then when I got laid off, all of a sudden I was behind the curve, right? And
Yeah.
so I was in a specialized field, and I didn't have the certifications I'd wanted for X number of years, and now I'm having to go and try to get those on my own, which is A, costly, and B, I wish I already had them, right? Too late. So social, I think social is important. I found out that when people, I got let go on round three of a layoff situation that's been going on for 18 months. And I worked real hard to keep tabs on my coworkers. As of now I'm in that position, I'm finding out that I must have been one of the few who was doing that.
Mm.
And it's kind of hard. You've worked with people for a lot of years, and somebody said you spend more time at work, or your work is your family, your friend group, right? Maybe that was you, Jason, but it's true. And so I feel kind of isolated from my friend group that I've had for a long time. I say, hey, let's have lunch, but they're busy working. They can't get together to do it, you know. Um, so I think that's important to make sure that our social networks include people other than work. It can be family, it can be, you said, church members, neighbors, things like that, because I'm behind the curve a little bit on that one too. So good
There are
point.
there are clubs. If you have interests, there are clubs and groups and meetups. In fact, there's an application called Meetup, which is all about people meeting up with common interests, meeting up with each other on a
Right.
regular basis. Um, there are free events out there. I know as a software developer, for example, if you have an interest in the Udemy or not Udemy, Unity game engine, I went several times to that as well. Now, admittedly, I have a large friend group, and I honestly think that part of the reason why I have a large friend group is because I am part of a community that does not have tend to have children. Um, Almost all of my friends that I see regularly are queer, because we don't have kids. Um, all the I hate to say it, but a lot of our straight friends, they've all faded away over time because they end up with kids, and then their focus then is on their kids, and their primary friend groups become the parents of their kids' friends. And the people involved with their kids' activities, and they just don't have time to come meet up and hang out and play board games and card games. Um, to be honest, that's how I usually make my friend groups. Is that starting in college, I knew a guy who he hosted game nights at his house on the weekends, in the evening, and sometimes it would just be playing poker. Other times it would be playing complicated board games that you probably have never heard of. And it was a lot of fun. We were always doing neat things. And what I noticed is like everybody knew this guy. There were so many people who knew this guy. And that is something that I've kept since throughout my life, is that I've either hosted game nights. After I moved up here to Utah, that's how I met a lot of people, is I started hosting a game night. And starts with a few friends, and you tell them, hey, bring over, if you know anybody who'd like to play board games with us, and eat chips, have them come, let me know and have them come over. Eventually, you have to put a stop on the number of people, like, ask us for permission first because you start having too many people over. But, it's a great way to meet people, is playing board games together, and card games. And a lot of people don't do that anymore.
You know, when I said, okay, I'm looking for a job now, and I'm a aspiring magician, which means I'm an old guy who just started, right? So um, and I put that away, and I said, okay, I need to focus on getting a job. And I just have realized recently that that was probably a mistake. I needed a little bit of different stuff in my life. And so I'm pulling out a few magic tricks and going back to the magic club meetings and things like that so that I can, I've got those friendships, but if I let them go too long, they'll fade away just like all others do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's helped me a little bit with my positive attitude. Anyway, thanks a lot. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. I should have known that about Carl, but maybe I didn't. Carl, we need to connect. I'm a member of SAM and IBM, so uh, you may know what those are. All right. Next up is Arian.
Hello, Arian.
Hey, Jason. Um, congrats and thanks for sharing your story. Um, I thought your talk was entertaining and informative. Just sharing, various things about your personal life and talked about your relationship, your evolving relationship with AI.
Yeah.
Um, Let me
I
think.
I think AI is going to be useful. I think that there's a lot of growing pain that's
Mm,
happening and going to continue to happen as it develops. It's
yeah.
change, and it's a lot of change very fast.
Oh yeah, definitely. Um, you may have mentioned it, but can you talk about the job that you just got an offer for, like how different it is from your old one, or how
Okay.
different it was from exactly what you were looking for?
In my previous job, at Goldman Sachs, a lot of the focus of my career there was in order controls. So real-time systems that are checking the orders going from our clients to the market, and if they fail to meet certain requirements, they get rejected. The trick is that so things like, oh, these orders are spending money the customer does not have, we need to or does not want to spend, we need to start rejecting them, which could be a sign of a software malfunction on our client's end or even our own software. Um, so in there, we're trying to work with very low latency responses because everybody wants their messages to get to the market as fast as possible. Nobody wants to spend very much time with their stuff being checked, but it still needs to be checked. So we have to respond extremely quickly inside of the program. With the new system, with the new company, with AppSy, the focus is on providing underlying networking protocols. So it is in C++, most of their software. They are they've developed their own protocol and system that their software acts kind of like a VPN, in which instead of going out to the internet, uh, toward directly to a website, instead it goes through essentially this VPN, which is using their own custom protocol. Um, and then from their systems, your your uh, your data is actually sent out. They have some proprietary system in place where if a certain amount of your data fails to make it to their server, like due to a bad, not very reliable cell phone connection issue, that they can reconstruct what that data is, which makes which makes it, say, if you're at a convention or a concert where you have so many thousands of people all hitting the same network system, your data can be reconstructed. Now, this is based off of the work of the guy who I was interviewing with. He developed whatever mathematical system is involved with this error correction and error correcting system that they're using. But their system, it's all pretty low level networking protocol uh, behavior and implementation. So that's what I'm going to be doing at the new place. It also sounds like I'm going to be doing a much more managerial role than I have before. I've been a lead software developer for projects. I've had people working under me. Um, And it sounds like I will probably have people working under me here as well. Um, but because currently, right now, the heads of the company, they're heavily involved with doing coding reviews, trying to make sure the code is up to a reasonable standard. And there have been some serious technical debt that they've incurred because of more junior programmers developing code in ways that's hard to maintain, and due to and because they're a small company working off of contracts, sometimes you just have to accept what you have to meet the contract requirements. So there, and let technical debt build up a little bit, because he was telling me that there's one chunk of code that they have in their code base, which he's like, it's a 500, 600 line function that is very complicated, which would have been greatly simplified if the developer had used state machines. But by the time that the more senior developers found out that the developer had used a nested chunk of if then else statements, um, complicated spaghetti code, it was kind of too late. They didn't have the time to have it redeveloped in the simpler, easier to maintain way. So I'm also going to be involved with trying to get a handle on some of their technical debt, which builds up, you know, technical debt for people who aren't developers. It's like you're constructing a birdhouse. And you do the best you can building that birdhouse, and you probably made a bunch of mistakes. But at the end, you have a birdhouse, and the bird can use it. And you keep looking at it outside and going, next time I'm not going to use vomit green as the paint on my birdhouse. I need to repaint the birdhouse. It still works as a birdhouse. You could still use it, but you're looking at it going, gosh, that really needs to be redone. So anyway,
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Arian. Next up is Roger Minnick.
Hi, Jason.
hi, Roger.
Congratulations. I think I've been
Thank you.
looking for a job a little bit shorter time than you since November. So, um,
Well, except I didn't start looking until this year. I postponed the looking job until technically January, and actually was really slow walking it through January, to be honest. So February is about when I actually was getting job hunting.
that's about the time I started myself because I was actually interviewing with Pure Storage for about the first 3 months,
Mhm.
and it just didn't work out.
Uh,
Um, so I was hoping to get on them, so I wasn't applying anywhere else. You know, one of
yeah.
the things that I've learned, and I think a lot of us are learning, is when you're currently employed in a position, no matter where you're at, even if your employer discourages you from taking training or going to conferences and stuff, you got to do it.
Mhm.
You got to keep yourself marketable and, you know, ready to move on to another job. And that's one of the mistakes I made was not, I spent 11 years at Dell EMC Technologies. And even though I was learning their products and stuff, I wasn't looking on the outside to see what other employers were looking for and what was the trending in the market where the industry was going. And I've been in IT for almost 30 years, and I wish I would have changed things up away. So, so
Yeah,
right,
no. The way that I've heard it stated before is that the only person responsible for your career is you. Your employer is not responsible for it.
correct. So, so I'm out there looking. Hopefully, what I got interview from last week will work out. Um, if it doesn't, I'm still looking, still trying to get those interviews. AI is very interesting to work with. It'll get out a resume, and I was doing cover letters too, but now I think I may actually abandon the cover letters to see if that'll work. Um, there's that again. One of the things I learned with AI is when I seen something in AI, I went back and asked it, do you really want me to use this in my resume? And then it would come up and say, well, good idea. Maybe we don't. And it would come and rewrite it and resume for that. So you always got to kind of question AI too.
Yes.
and see what it says. Sometimes it comes back and says no or yes, you want to use it because of this. And then you understand why it's putting it, in your resume. So
There are places that, like Canonical, they are very clear on every single step of the way that they do not want you using AI to write your responses and write your questions or write your
even
responses to their questions.
I applied for a job there, and I even think that they asked, "Are you using AI for resume
Yeah.
development, all these other things?" And of course, I had to say no at the time. I wasn't using it. I was giving them
Yeah.
my resume that I've had, my master resume, which was a great match for the position that I was applying for. But
Hmm.
I got a rejection letter, and I
Oh,
realized that they're a pretty tough company to get working for. So,
I do expect that because again, they're a global remote, fully remote company. So they have opportunities, but I think they can be really picky too. I'm sorry you got rejected for it.
no, I'm gotten rejected more than I got interviews. So it's just the way it goes.
Part of the process. Thank you.
Yep.
I've got a couple people here who have been here. Let's see, who did I miss? Where did he go? I'm looking for him. Um, well, let's throw the only lady here. She may not have a camera, but let's throw Angela. Angela was here before. Angela took a job with the IRS, and she got an opportunity to take a package and look for another job. So, any questions you have? I saw you jump on here, Angela. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? Is that okay? All
Yep.
right. I have lots of little things that keep me muted, um, on purpose. So congratulations, Jason, on
Thank you.
your new job and your success there, and thank you for sharing your story. I do have one question for you. As you were going through the process of finding a job, you mentioned looking outside of LinkedIn and like those networking or not networking, but those platforms for employment. I didn't catch where I kind of gather that you're in the tech industry. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I'm a software developer.
Oh, excellent. Where did you start looking for those job opportunity or job companies? That's what I'm looking for is, did you just do a Google search of what are tech companies that are hiring or what companies exist out there?
Ah, let's see. Well, um, I mean, some of them I found through LinkedIn and Indeed. That if you choose the application button, as opposed to the easy apply, it takes you to their website or to the website of their hiring agency, which, is where you end up applying. There was one, what was it? Something Fox. It's located in Salt Lake. They have defense contracts, and they were, and I applied through there. Um, so in a number of cases, I did find I mean, some of them just took you to a straight up, um, you know, kind of general website that I'm sure you apply for lots. You could upload your results for a lot of different companies. Some of them, it was more specific, their webpage. And EverFox, that was it. So I did go to, so like the EverFox thing took me directly to their main website, which is where you created an account and log in and start applying. Um, and I'm slow sometimes, so it took me a time to figure out that a lot of the companies that I applied to seem to be running their own application site. Uh, so it was more of a, well, I have a lot of experience on Linux. Let me think about the Linux companies and see what they have. And that's where I found the Canonical, site, the fact that they have 150 job openings that they usually about, all different types of jobs. That said, the application process for them is fairly onerous. So, you know, it 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 takes a lot of time to apply to them. So I haven't applied to a lot of different companies directly off of their website, like Canonical. Canonical was the big one that I was moving through. Um, and it was because I'd gotten past the written interview. Um, the written interview itself, you have 2 weeks to answer the 38 questions, and they're substantial. To be honest, I think that if you have an actual job at the time, you would have it might be difficult for you to make it in the 2 weeks. Didn't help that I had a vacation scheduled already during a week-long vacation scheduled in the middle of these 2 weeks, but thankfully being unemployed meant I could still focus on the darn things and get it done in time. Um, Otherwise, it comes down to just thinking, what are the big companies that are in the spaces that I might that I would be interested in, that may need my services, my abilities. I did also, for example, I went to Zion's Bank's uh, website and applied to a couple of the credit unions too. Although I eventually stopped because I think that most of the credit unions, while they do occasionally have positions open for software developer, they're more interested in people that are developing like phone applications for their environments. And I have a lot of experience. That makes me expensive, but I don't have a lot of experience in that, which makes me less desirable. So, um, what's your skill set in, Angela?
Oh, I'm a hospitality and administrative type
Okay.
person. So I was just asking because I find myself in that pigeonhole of ZipRecruiter. I don't think they know what they're doing, but Indeed and LinkedIn are my primary sources for opportunities,
Yeah.
and I am not sure that I am getting the best of what I can find from those two platforms. So I was just curious how you approached that
Ah,
as you were searching. So I appreciate your thoughts on that.
for LinkedIn, part of it, I noticed that it would start showing me the same jobs over and over again.
Yeah.
So I believe that it's been pointed out here that you kind of have to ignore the sponsored jobs because sponsored tends to be pushed up and are not necessarily recent. You kind of want the most recent jobs to try and get closer to the top of the stack for applying. And based off of a previous lady who was here and gave her story, she was a recruiter. Her career was being a recruiter. She pointed out that a lot of companies, they will publish their open jobs on Wednesday and Fridays. So they post on Friday so that the jobs are present when people arrive on Monday and are thinking about getting a new job. And they're also posts on Wednesday because people, as they're going, oh my God, this week we can't wait for it to be over, are also more likely to apply for jobs at that point. So you should also consider, keeping an eye out for new job postings on like on those evenings or the following day.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And congratulations on your new job. That's exciting.
Yeah. This is just based off of what another person here has said on these job teams. So,
Thanks, Angela. Next up is Jason.
Hello, Jason. It's
hey,
just weird to
Jason.
say that. Um,
Eh,
there
we're
was
back in school again. It's
yeah.
Jason G versus Jason D.
Oh no, when I was there, I was alone.
I think the
I was
worst
cutting
case,
edge back in the day.
I think the worst case was is that there were 5 kids with the first name Jason
Wow.
in some of my classes.
Um, let's see. Now that you've said about I can't stop it. So first thing, I spent 2 months in Socorro one weekend, and so did you ever visit there?
Socorro, New Mexico is where I went to college. The New Mexico
Oh, you're in New
Institute of
Mexico
Mining.
State,
Yeah, New
New
Mexico
Mexico
Institute of
Tech,
Mining and Technology was established there at, I think, like 1886, something like
right?
that.
Oh yeah,
When New Mexico was trying to become a state, they established uh, the areas, the initial university systems that you had University of New Mexico, you have state down in um, Las
Las
Cruces,
Cruces,
and then
Aggies.
and then you
That's my
have
class.
and then you have the tech nerds in the middle in Socorro. And I had a great time going to college there and working there. It's small, it's isolated, certainly, but the college students who came and they were looking for frat life and wild parties and nightclubs to go to, that wasn't in Socorro. They usually left and transferred to UNM or to Cruces. We But if you were there to talk nerd and to tell and to have arguments with people that people outside of your field of interest could not understand, New Mexico Tech was the way to go.
What years were you there?
Um, I started in the fall of 1995 and graduated in 2001.
Because we took a trip while I was still in high school down there, and it was a what would you call it, a seminar for the weekend. And while we were there, my friend's car that we rode in broke down 2 or 3 times. It was just a bad time. Then we went down and visited one of my friends that had graduated, who was going to college there while we were still in high school, and had one of the best weekends I ever had for as much as I can remember about it. So, but yeah, so it was this huge dichotomy of range of experience in Socorro. But my main serious question was the training that you were taking while being unemployed, did that help you get a job, and do you anticipate using that in the new career?
Interestingly enough, it did not. And I do not expect to. They are very low level at the new place. They are not, they do not have need of developing a website. They have a basic website, and
Good
speaking
enough.
with that's good enough. That's all that they care about. Like the first company I worked for, called PMC, interestingly enough, is they did not advertise, they did not have a sign, because in their case they were like, we don't need to. The people who know about us already know how to get a hold of us, and that's because they did physical simulations. We had a post-it note that we would put on the front door when when we had visitors coming, so that they would know
Which
which
door to
door was hot.
answer?
Yeah. Um, at Goldman Sachs, in some ways, it was a similar thing. It was a we don't advertise ourselves because the people who use our services already know
Know
who
who
we
we
are.
are.
Now, this company, they're
A little startup. They need
they're
lots of
yeah, they're not heavily involved with advertising themselves because they're not advertising for individual people. They're advertising for other companies. They're advertising, I know that one of their clients that they work for is a cell phone gaming company. But but Apsy doesn't make the cell phone game. They make uh, the underlying networking protocol that
connects them together.
makes it more reliable and thus annoys the customers less, because they can play their game without being disconnected or receiving a notification. Oh, you know.
Right.
You're disconnected. You got to go back to the title screen. And I've seen plenty of games that do that. And I know from a personal experience that that's annoying as all get out. So there, this company isn't, to think of the gold rush. This company isn't the company that is that is doing the mining. This is the company that is attempting to sell shovels to the mining companies and miners.
Hmm.
So
That makes sense.
so yeah. That said, I'm still learning this stuff because, to be honest, it's neat, it's fun, it's a lot less frustrating. Last time I was doing web development, it was on my own back in college and shortly afterwards. And a lot of this stuff didn't exist, and it was hard to make websites that, were reactive, that were terribly interactive. Um, so yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of work. Me and my friends started a convention and ran it for 4 years. It was small. We got up to about 300 people coming up to our things, but I ended up writing a lot of the software at the time. Um, Never good enough. It was always under such a time crunch in my spare time that it was never good enough to actually publish, even attempt to publish, even if I didn't have the Goldman Sachs contract impacting me there.
Hanging over you.
Yeah, yeah, but so I did do some development. I created an inventory tracking system that we used for our for the convention, and I was a board member on this convention. Very small. Um, we had to form a nonprofit for it. Uh,
Was
for
was this in Socorro then too?
oh no, 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 this was here in Salt Lake.
Oh.
So
Well, you said during college you'd done some web stuff.
oh yeah, during
Yeah.
college I'd done some web stuff, and then there was a little bit later on.
Uh,
But overall, this is the most I've been about learning to do the front end development. And to be honest, in some parts, like JavaScript is programming. So what makes JavaScript different is that people have said, yeah, trying to do this in just JavaScript sucks. So we're going to generate this. So we've developed this system that takes you write using our system, and it goes through this and it churns out the JavaScript that you could have written, and that's
right.
what goes to your website. And it's like so people are like, we love JavaScript. And it's like, what? Why do you keep writing your own programming languages that then become JavaScript?
Might as well just learn it directly.
Yeah, but oh well, it does speed things up, and it is interesting to see the frameworks that people have developed over time.
Are you from New Mexico? I keep going back to this.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mostly grew up from New Mexico. We moved around a lot when I was a little kid, but about fourth grade we settled in New Mexico, and I spent all the way up until 2008 there.
In Socorro?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, not just Socorro. We were in Albuquerque and then Los Lunas, and then eventually, when I went to college, I went to Socorro, and I stayed after graduation,
Hmm.
working for the company there.
Yeah. I'm a I'm a mostly New Mexico guy until I moved to Utah.
Yeah. I do well in both small companies and large companies.
Yeah.
So
Okay. We're about 5 minutes to the hour. Brad Heaton, I didn't know if he had something to say. Brad's been quiet. Brad's working his job, so I
Uh,
I didn't know if he had anything to say.
I didn't have any questions, but congratulations.
thank you very much, Brad.
And maybe I missed this earlier on, but happy birthday, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy birthday, Steve.
Okay, I am going to end, and we're gonna wrap up, but I want you to stay on for a few more minutes. So, any final parting words, Jason?
Uh, I think a lot of it is, you know, I think other people on the job team have also advised this, but make sure again to take some time away from the job hunt as well. Have time to to visit with some friends, meet up with some people, let some of the stress get off of you sometime. Um, Spend some time with your dog. Make sure to take your dog for a walk. Yeah. If you don't have a dog, go for a walk anyway. Walks are really underrated, and there's a lot of places you can walk here in Utah that is really, really nice. One of the things I did not mention in my story is that I ended up with plantar fasciitis after getting laid off. So I couldn't walk much from November all the way until I think April, March or April. It was not good.
Out.
And it's definitely harder if you can't get out, get some sort of exercise, but walking is nice because it gets you outside. You can see stuff. So,
And don't forget to take your dog with you or
yeah,
dogs.
if you have a dog. If you don't, then well,
Borrow one.
maybe one day you can earn yourself a dog.
I walk usually twice a day with my dogs, and it does help break up just being in the house all day long. It is very relaxing.
And dogs are really good about fitting in with the schedule, so they can help you have a schedule where you can take a break and do a walk.
Okay, well, thank you, Jason, for coming today. This is Jason Trowbridge. I think it was more just a conversation with Jason. So thank you,
Well, thank
Jason.
you.